The Dragon King's Daughter is a wonderful parable found in the Lotus Sutra, in which an 8-year-old daughter of a dragon demonstrates her ability to achieve enlightenment. Her declaration of her right to be happy took place before an entire assembly of gods, Buddhas, saints, and sages at the ceremony in the air. She is most certainly one of the first equal rights crusaders. This modern-day rendition of the Dragon King's Daughter is about a Colorado cowgirl gone astray, falling into a horrendous heroin habit. Luckily, her sister and Cuban brother-in-law saved the day by taking her back to 1978 Brooklyn, where the New York City salsa scene is on fire. From here, the story is told. Disfrútalo y mil gracias. Round 11. Wrung dry in Norman. I really didn't know about racism until we lived in Oklahoma. I remember watching the Watts riots on TV and wondering what my bluest eye was beholding. But the riots had been televised when we lived in Littleton, and I didn't have a clue. I wanted to know, what were those people doing to deserve such a clubbing? I got as much explanation about the Watts situation as I did about a picture of a GI in Life magazine. It was just one of those things adults didn't have time to stop and explain. Little girls running all aflame. Then again, from this very same mother, I learned about the Holocaust and the Japanese-American internees during World War II. She made it a point to educate me about a lot of worldly issues. The information was offered on her terms, however. I say this not to take away from the incredible cultural indulgences I inherited and absorbed from her essence. No, not at all. On the contrary, she blew my mind. She listened to bossa nova while she cleaned the house, lightly dusting in her fitted capris. She was the Mary Tyler Moore type, thoroughly sensual even while cleaning, donning only a scarf and a smile. She was hip, knew all the jazz artists in town, and hung out in Five Points and Aspen long before the movie stars. Your mother was the kindest and most beautiful woman in high school, said my contemporaries' mothers to me as a grown-up. Your mother is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, said all the men I've ever known. Which is something, I suppose, but it was also my mom who taught me to never rely on physical beauty, transient as it is, but rather to try to cultivate a beautiful self from inside out. In a lot of ways, I've flourished from her guidance, her straight and narrow ways, but I can't help wondering how things would have been for that ice queen mother of mine had she been born in Bahia. In college, I wrote a paper on Toni Morrison's novella, The Bluest Eye. It was required reading in several of my literature classes. I marveled at how Miss Morrison tore into my first grade primer, the one with Dick and Jane, using it as a juxtaposition to transition from one chapter to another. In her dismantling the myth of the American dream, she penned the perfect prelude to the Columbine School massacre. Too bad more people didn't dare read between the lines. I was drawn to it because it told the story of an incested child so succinctly. Toni Morrison also truthfully examined the African American subculture in its tendency to emulate the dominant white culture, with the focus on white America's hypocrisies and idiosyncrasies. I loved that work. I bought copies for all my friends and shared it with a lot of young female incest survivors of every color. Working as a teacher, I know incest is not an isolated behavior. It crosses every cultural barrier with an ease that shouldn't be there. It should be hard to get away with psychological murder, but it isn't, because just like warfare, in someone's askewed way of thinking, it's justifiable. In Oklahoma, I learned people felt the same way about hating people of another color, that it was perfectly natural, and these were God-fearing people. There was only one African-American family in my neighborhood, a father and his 2 daughters. I played with the younger one named Leanne. Leanne wore glasses and did good in school. She wasn't allowed to stay out late playing in the streets like the rest of us. Her dad always called her inside before it got dark, and come to think of it, she was never with us when we went to play out in the countryside. Leanne had to take precaution to the next level. This was, after all, 1969 in Norman, Oklahoma. Even Angela Davis would have had trouble breaking the barrier. One day, all the neighborhood kids were playing spin the bottle in my backyard. This was the only time we ever played the game, and ironically, Leanne was with us that day. I knew that if the bottle stopped turning with the top pointing towards me, I was going to get up and leave. There was no way I was going to kiss any of those Okie boys under any conditions whatsoever. The bottle spun and stopped on Leanne. Billy had spun it. Billy said, "No way." I wished I was from another planet. "No way what?" I asked, hoping to not get an answer. "No way, I can't do it. I'll spin again," he answered. "Billy," I said, "what's the matter?" "I can't kiss her," he said, in a way that made you think that what he was saying was a thing understood by everyone present. "Why?" I was pushing the parameter. Billy got up and walked away. "I'm leaving," he said, and he slipped away from the tree branch shaded shelter. I looked at Leanne in wide-eyed wonder, knowing she was experiencing a pain that was an inherent part of her Black identity. She was set apart and persecuted for nothing. Why did Billy stay and play the game if he knew he might spin the bottle and land on Leanne? I couldn't understand why he had let something that was such a big deal to him happen. I couldn't understand why it was a big deal. If anything, it was Leanne who, like me, probably felt mortified by the idea of kissing Billy. But I couldn't explain this one way or ever profess to understand the lashing sting of Billy's words and the everlasting effect they would have on Leanne's interior. I never realized how violent words could be, or that as a society we were masters at verbal slaying. "Damn," I said my first cuss word out loud to the world, not able to keep it in my 12-year-old head. The Little Bells of Oklahoma singled me out my first day of school. They shunned me because I didn't answer one of their initiation into the cool click questions right. They let their boyfriends know right away that I was weird. All school year, I endured their jeers. When I left for school every morning, I was teary-eyed in preparation for the cruelty that I would have to take the brunt of each day. The Oklahoma youngsters were into going steady, already preparing for the opposite sex to notice them. The girls accepted ID bracelets from their pursuers and so were branded with some guy's initials. The bracelets made the going steady part official. I was into jumping rope and playing horses because at school I couldn't ride my real horse around the playground. I was steady building up thoroughbred legs with long, sinewy muscles. It was about this time when men started whistling at me and saying, "Look at the legs on that filly." But I wasn't growing my stems for the likes of them. No siree, especially since the first fools to notice were my Uncle Tex and Grandpa Hammond. I was not flattered at all, and ran even faster and jumped even higher to prove it. I was an outcast in my own school, but I held the spirit of the world in my heart, and I knew that no one could destroy it. I had my victory all right. One day at school, we got into a King of the Hill match on an old, debarked, and fallen tree trunk. I was definitely in my element. I held back the masses one by one. At first, the challengers were all female. I threw them off as if I had been trained all my life for hand-to-hand combat. Then the boys started coming. Oklahoma boys had a habit of being self-righteous, and since they had permission from the females to treat me any kind of way, they were especially obnoxious. I threw them just the same. I held on to the tree through my shoes with my feet. I was somehow perfectly balanced up there as queen of the tree, a skill I'm sure I acquired from the miles I put in as a writer. My mom got a job at the University of Oklahoma in order to support us children. Her faded ways continue. She had married a con artist who moved us all to Oklahoma because of some job he had selling motivation to people. He moved our family to Norman, where they hated hippies, including my sister Geneva, and abandoned us. My mom's not a complainer. She is action through and through. Seize the moment, says her mind of mother. Do all you can do while you can. You'll never regret it. While working away at the university, she befriended a woman who would come to work all beat up by her husband. My mom witnessed the beatings as they manifested as black and blue tattoos that barraged the woman's body. One night, the woman shot her husband dead in the head with a gun she had purchased at a pawn shop. I guess she was sick of the threats her big wig husband kept making about how he would kill both her parents and her 3-year-old baby if she ever tried to leave him. Being as she was a battered woman who was reduced to nothing, she felt the only way she could escape this guy was by killing him. So she did. My mom and her boss were ordered to appear in court so that they could testify on her behalf. Her lawyer even offered up the perspective of the battered woman syndrome in order to defend her. To no avail, of course. This was, after all, God's country. Women just couldn't be allowed to defend themselves against brutality. It was the guarded right of their husbands to beat them when necessary, not that people supported it overtly. It was just a thing not to be recognized or discussed within good Christian society. The woman got sentenced with manslaughter and was forced to do time in McAllister Prison, a prison that was infamous for its barbaric rehabilitating practices and subhuman conditions. It was rough to the nth degree. My mom went to visit this gal in spite of her own problems with her conniving husband and was really distressed by the state of mind her friend was in. It appeared prison was going to beat her down good. Too bad she didn't know how to suck her life up into a tiny red ball in her gut and hold it there tightly. In all fairness, prison sentences should come with manuals for survival. Too many have to learn it firsthand. If you weren't already a callous soul, how would you know to make like a machine, an automaton, a robotic entity without warm blood or feelings in order to make it through the next 24? Then again, all the training in the world could never prepare a person for the version of a Vichy hell known as prison. Toward the end of our year in Oklahoma, my 6th grade class had a track meet against another school. We bussed over to the opposing team's field, and when we got off of the bus, I saw that my scamming stepdad was at the meet with his equally questionable business partner. "Charles!" I cried out, so happy to see him and proud to have my very own daddy present. We ran all the races, jumped and threw. I didn't do so well. My coach informed me that due to my coming of age figure, I had slowed down a lot since softball season. On that note, I headed to the final race, the one where you have to go the distance. It was the race of a lifetime, a Walter Farley transcription. I was the powerful black stallion. Adjusting my pace to the spurt of speed released by the sprinters, I planned my race with a strategy based on my favorite childhood novels. I tucked my head and flared my nostrils, passing the quarter horses by as I gathered my mighty thoroughbred momentum. I ran from my withers and flanks, angling my body so as to envelop the circles of the wind. My mane flew behind me as I gathered more strength from my center, and I felt myself getting stronger. My feet were hooves that never touched the ground. I just flew along, having fun. I was laughing at the ease with which I won the race. What began as a competition ended up as an act of transcendence. As I soared past the trees, feeling free, due to the release of the natural brain chemicals flowing through me, I uncovered another layer. The rubber sheet that had been suffocating me on some mysterious level came out of my liver or intestines or from behind my knees. Possibly from within my heart, the organ medical science is starting to recognize as the center for memory. Fantastical as the idea might be to the Western mind, a delightful concept that ricochets against the backlash of false memory. Something like, in your face, go tell Black Elk not to speak about the dual nature of the heart and mind in balanced integration. Try to find a poet who doesn't discuss the matter. You won't. Even the precision of the surgeon's cold metal instrument can't cut the truth from the heart. It is what life knows. It is the pulse, the rock, the tree. The Brazilian song that sings of the enlightened nature of life simplistically. A rendition in layman's terms of the Lotus Sutra's 24 negations. The law, the sound, the word, in the beginning, the word, the sound, the law of life equally integrated as heart and mind. I ran under the trees that were showering down rays of Reiki to help ease me through the backstretch of the race. Here is where the Black had to overcome his heavy-laden handicap and resolve to win. Here is where I came up against myself again and again and again. The backstretch of life was my holding pin, and I was about to break through it and turn the final turn into the home stretch. I had breezed by the competition, swept them up with my tail, but I wasn't sure if I could win over myself.